Kiss the Villain by Rina Kent is a dark enemies to lovers Kindle Unlimited book published on March 20th, 2025. And if you've seen my video about God of Fury, also by Rina Kent, you might be asking yourself the question, Carter, why are you doing this? Why? Well, firstly, I always believe in giving people the benefit of the doubt and in second chances. And two, you wouldn't stop asking me about it. Everyone kept asking me, are you going to read Kiss the Villain? What do you think about Kiss the Villain? I've heard it's even worse than God of Fury. Tell me, Carter. Well, now I want you to look down at the timeline and just know that you brought this on yourselves. So over the next several hours, I am going to recap this book if you haven't read it recently or you've never read it and don't intend to. And then I am going to get into its themes. I'm going to discuss the characters and the plot and the structure. I'm going to say some good things about this book. Shocking, I know. But I am going to say more bad things, which is not shocking. And if you stay until the end, I promise we will have a fun little treat. Perhaps the two main characters reminded me of two main characters from some other kind of fiction. Ooh. But you have to stay for the meat and potatoes before you can watch that section. Don't just jump to the slash section at the end. If I had to suffer through this, you have to suffer through it with me. So strap in tight as we get started. I wouldn't want anyone to get rotated. Let's begin with a character overview and a recap of the plot of Kiss the Villain. If you haven't read this book in a while, or if you haven't read this book at all, I don't necessarily recommend that you ever do, although I also don't necessarily recommend that you don't. We'll get there. Starting off with the characters, unlike God of Fury and I assume the rest of the Legacy of Gods books, this is really about the two main male characters. There are obviously side characters. There are many side characters who feature in the previous Legacy of Gods books. Gareth's brother Killian, his girlfriend Glyndon, Nico, and later Bran from God of Fury feature in this book, but they are hardly more than cameos. There are a few new characters in this book, mostly related to Caden, but you really just need to know Gareth Carson and Caden Lockwood. Gareth Carson is a 21-year-old wunderkind. He is frequently described as a golden boy. He is a member of the Heathens Mafia Princelet Club on Brighton Island, United Kingdom. This is a fantastical island of mafia princes and princesses from the Legacy of Gods book that is curiously out of step with the rest of the world. The idea seems to be that rival mafia families send their princes and princesses to this island where they can get an education and also learn how to do mafia. There is a fight club. It is a much more fun idea than I've seen it be executed in the one Legacy of Gods book that I read, God of Fury. Perhaps it is more thoroughly explored in the other books. I don't intend on reading them. Kiss the Villain also takes place in this setting, but it is not concerned with what's going on the island. It is very not concerned with what's going on with the mafia families, despite the fact that Gareth is the fixer for the Heathens clan. Caden Lockwood is 32 years old, 11 years older than Gareth. He is physically a bit bigger than him. He is taller, broader shoulder, stronger guy. And he is a criminal law professor at the school that Gareth attends. And this is one of those curiously out of step things. I won't belabor this, but as far as I can tell, Brighton Island seems to resemble a US style university and graduate education, and not so much the United Kingdom. There's frequent references to GPA, which I don't think is all that common in the United Kingdom. Gareth is also in law school, and I believe most legal education in the United Kingdom is just undergraduate for what he is doing, whereas very clearly like a traditional US style 3-year law school, don't worry about it. I mean, I worried about it. I had a lot of notes being like, how old is he again? What is this? I don't think this is how this works. And I Googled about it, and it's not how it works, but whatever. What's strange is that Rina Kent, supposedly, whoever Rina Kent is, lives in London. I don't know, perhaps Rina Kent is a non-native English speaker. It's hard to say. She's very mysterious. Just like Brighton Island and Caden Lockwood. Caden Lockwood is a man of mystery. He shows up on this island one day to be the criminal law professor at this place, and everyone is obsessed with him because he's so hot. But he also has a dark and traumatic history like every other character in all of these books. He also is going to have a dark and traumatic present with Gareth Carson, and that is where we will begin our story. Kiss the Villain begins with a mission, a sexual assault mission. Gareth, the fixer Carson, the golden boy, highest GPA, potential Ivy Leaguer heathen, decides that he wants to get up to some trouble at the beginning of this book. He wants to hurt someone. Someone in particular, Yulian Dmitriev, the head of the Serpents, the rival gang to the Heathens. The Serpents are the, college affiliate of the Chicago Bratva, whereas the Heathens are the affiliate of, I believe, the New York Bratva. Gareth has a plan. It's not necessarily a great plan, but he has a plan. He is going to go to a Serpents party, and he is going to spike Yulian's drink, and then he is going to cut off the head, as it were, of the Serpents by implicating Yulian in a gay sex scandal. Now remember, Gareth Carson is consistently described as a super genius. So super genius Gareth Carson's plan is to follow Yulian after the drugs go to his head when he inevitably peels off from the party and goes to somewhere by himself. And when Yulian collapses into a state of unconsciousness, Gareth is going to pour semen-like lube all on his face, whip out his appendage, and take a picture so it looks like, some funny business has happened. How he knows that Yulian is going to go to a room by himself in this mansion is mysterious. Maybe he didn't think it through that clearly, but that is exactly what happens, thank God. And while thinking about how all of the people of the world are stupid animals that bow to super genius Gareth Carson's will, he follows Yulian to a back room, and he's about to spring his trap when the trap gets sprung on him. That's right, the guy that he roofied wasn't Yulian, it was some other guy. Some guy with a snake tattoo on his chest. He knows that because he took a knife to cut off this guy's clothes, and he noticed this beautiful snake design tattoo on this beautiful man, but he doesn't know what he looks like because everybody's wearing a mask at this party. Everyone always wears masks at parties on Brighton Island, so it's easier for plot reasons. They all wear plot protective masks, which is happening here, and masked snake tattoo guy wasn't roofied at all. It's a trap. Gareth, get out of there. But he doesn't get out of there. In fact, instead of getting out of there, he is forced to perform oral sex on this man at gunpoint. Ooh, they start that way. And the thing is, Gareth, who has never been involved with a man in this way before, is getting off on this. Particularly this snake tattooed man, crushing his junk a little bit with his shoe. That particular fetish is not going to rear its head. I don't know, maybe we'll get a novella that includes some CBT, but that does not come back. There's plenty of other things that these two guys are going to get up to, because yes, in fact, that was Caden. We don't know that just yet. But after Caden finishes, he just ups and leaves. There are many layered explanations for what was going on here that won't all totally be revealed until Act 3, but this is how the book starts. Gareth doesn't think that taking a sexual picture of someone and putting it on the internet to ruin their life is sexual assault. He's wrong. He hasn't taken his criminal law course yet. Maybe he's going to learn that in Criminal Law 101 with Professor Caden Lockwood. But he thinks that this is, just like a normal thing to do, because he is a psychopath, like all of the characters in all of these books. And he was hoisted by his own petard. And the whole being aroused thing is going to rear its head several more times, pun somewhat intended, because it is established in a few chapters that Gareth Carson has voluntary control over his erections, a thing which is not a thing. Now, the point of this is that because he became aroused involuntarily, it must be true love. This is also like a very consistent position of the book, which is physical arousal equals consent, a thing which is also not a thing. Anyway, so the next day, Gareth does go to that first criminal law class. And who is the professor but Professor Blowjob? That's right, the mystery man is his criminal law professor. Can you believe it? How outrageous. And like I said, everyone, all the boys and all the girls are obsessed with super genius, super hot professor Caden Lockwood, which of course causes Gareth to, fantasize about banging a woman's head on a desk because Rina Kent is, a Rina Kent book is nothing if it doesn't involve very graphic fantasies of harming women. Gareth realizes that this is Caden because he recognizes his eyes. He's freaking out. He stays behind after class, and with the door open, they discuss their previous encounter. Caden and Gareth then start mutually stalking each other, and this is where we begin to realize that there are many depths to Professor Caden Lockwood. First of all, he has a guy named Jethro that he's constantly texting and calling who can do missions for him. It's very unusual that a college professor would have like that man in the chair kind of person. Gareth is also stalking Caden, which Caden is, eventually becomes aware of because he has like whatever, some sort of security system set up around him. And after Caden stacks the deck against Gareth in his criminal law class with on like the first day, setting up a mock trial situation over a rape case with Gareth defending the rapist. This has, set off Gareth. This is one of like 9,000 times in the story that he just like goes to 11. And the way that Gareth goes to 11 in this case is he figures out where Caden lives and he breaks in, and Caden wakes up in the middle of the night with Gareth on top of him in bed with a syringe to his neck. While holding the syringe against Caden's neck, he thinks for a while. He ruminates. Get used to this. This happens a lot in Rina Kent books. Instead of learning the plot through like characters interacting with each other or things happening, we just get people thinking about things. Lots of thinking. So Gareth reflects on several days of stalking and noting that Caden is particularly boring. He hired a PI named Nadine that he had to get on the dark web because he doesn't want to use his mafia connections. And while thinking all of these thoughts, he, for some inexplicable reason, only injects like half of whatever substance he has into Caden, and then Caden immediately gets the other hand in the situation. He does the like get rotated meme on Gareth. This will happen many more times. Gareth gets rotated several times in this book. In getting the upper hand, Caden also gets the syringe and he puts the other half of the drug cocktail, whatever it is, into Gareth. What? Gareth, what are you doing? So this has now given permission for whatever is going to happen in the next chapter. So, because of the drugs, Gareth doesn't like get up and leave or get out of the situation. He just kind of gawks at a disrobing and eventually naked Caden Lockwood, and thinks about how the worst thing in the world for him would be to lose control over any situation, but he also just like allows control to be loosened from him in this situation. This is like his thing. He will explicitly express this to Caden several times subsequent to this situation. But Caden doesn't know that, so he is about to perform another assault on this young man. Caden says, "You obviously want to be or you wouldn't have come here," because he is psychic on top of being super hot and a super genius. Gareth says that he's not into men, but he just allows himself to like get into Caden's bed. Gareth also calls Caden a rapist, to which Caden replies, "You're the one who keeps using these rapey drugs," which is true. So we get another like forced oral scene here, which Gareth can blame on the drug. And Caden also, for the first of several times, does a, your mouth says no, 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 but your body says yes, yes, yes. And it's because Gareth has an erection, which, remember, he never gets involuntary erection, so that's how we know that. So this is fine. This is fine. So they, get to completion there, and I'm sure this will never happen again. Now, I want you to keep in mind there is a big twist that we are going to learn in Act 3 about Caden. So these moments right here are just like, once you know the twist and you look back on them, they seem real odd. Caden thinks like, oh boy, it's not normal that I want to this kid Gareth. I mean, not kid. He's 21, but he is 11 years younger than me. And it's I don't like men. It's so yes, if you were wondering, this is a double bi awakening. Caden somehow, presumably through Jethro, finds Gareth's number and starts tauntingly texting him. This is very similar to something that happens in God of Fury. Get used to that observation. There are many things in this book that are basically copied and pasted from God of Fury. Caden also seems to have like a dossier on Gareth and Gareth's brother, and he knows a whole lot about his family. Keep that in your pocket for the big twist coming later. It is part of thinking about all of that we get the like third of 300 references to Gareth being a master manipulator. I think we actually see this happen maybe twice, and one of them is like something that anyone would probably do if they were just like casually trying to make something happen with their friends. But we are constantly told and reminded that Gareth is a golden boy, genius, master manipulator, master at masking. So Caden wants to continue to pursue this somehow. So he gets Jethro to, figure out a way to insert him into a heathen's initiation ritual. This is something that we have seen in Legacy of the Gods books. We certainly saw it in God of Fury, where it's basically like a most dangerous game, like with training wheels. People don't tend to like die in those games. Caden is able to like get through the heathens, security. So he must have access to like some very high-end hacking capabilities. He shows up there, and Gareth is on the scene protecting a woman. Her name is Cherry. She is not relevant to the story. Caden does not like this, and so he goes up to Gareth. And Gareth, who is an archer, shoots Caden several times with rubber arrows, which hurt, but don't, they are less lethal. And then he pulls out a steel arrow and is threatening to murder his criminal law professor. And both the violence and Caden's idea of wanting to tame a wild stallion come up, and he just decides to go for it, whether he's gonna die or not. He attacks Gareth and gets him up against a tree, and yep, get rotated, Gareth. Caden, for the third time in like seemingly 3 days, forces himself on Gareth, who only says stop, but he doesn't do anything about it. This book is very insistent that if you say you don't want to do something, but your body is aroused by it, that is then fine. That was, it was dubious consent. So here in the like middle part of the first act, we've already solidly established Caden and Gareth's relationship to one another, that it is based on violence, jealousy, possession, and getting rotated. Mostly Gareth getting rotated by Caden. He actually literally gets rotated by Caden, but we're not there yet. That's a long ways off. And Caden's big thing, certainly in the early parts of the book, but really throughout, is putting his 9-inch monster down Gareth Carson's throat and like being violent with him. He actually has the thought that he's never been with a man before, and he feels like he can be rough with a man, which is just very like, oh, that's like why people like MM romance. I'm just going to put it in my MM romance sort of thought. That happens here, but then it goes further because Caden has kind of staked a claim to Gareth Carson's butthole, and Gareth has made it clear, like, you are not going to me from the very beginning. Caden says like, I am going to you, and Gareth says, no, you're not. And that through the first act, that is like the major thing is whether Gareth is going to consent to butt stuff. And there is consent there. Caden in previous situations could have gone there and didn't. I mean, he had a gun in the beginning of the book, and he didn't all he did was force himself down Gareth Carson's throat and crush his junk with his foot. I mean, he didn't, he's not a monster. Anyway, he has Gareth up against a tree, and Through a series of contortions, he eventually gets himself down to the butt, and he causes Gareth to have a hands-free climax from prostate stimulation. This is where Caden begins referring to Gareth's ass as my and my. So there's like two things going on here, right? There is a like pushing submissiveness onto Gareth, and that submissiveness is feminization. And again, because Kent has to spell this all out, she will spell this all out with Gareth literally thinking those thoughts later in the book. I don't know why submissiveness has to go hand in hand with femininity, but it does here. There is also the possessiveness, and it's the two words, my. I understand that, but it just sounds like Caden is talking about his, and he will frequently say things like, my is taking my so well. And it's like, what are you talking about again? It's just weird. I just don't think it works very well. It's confusing. But all the way here in the, midpoint of Act 1, Gareth is liking it, so this is going to continue. Like I said, he has a hands-free climax from Gareth giving him a little prostate attention, and Gareth has quite a climax. It just bursts everywhere, and he thinks that this is like this is probably the best climax that he's had in his life, up against a tree with a guy manhandling his fart box. It's a tale as old as time. So Caden, despite also having finished, thinks that he can get it up again, and he wants to do it dry with Gareth up against a tree. A thing that also happens in God of Fury, but it doesn't actually happen here because Gareth is still like, no, you can't top me, no. And like I said, this is now the tension. This is the tension of like, what is gonna happen? Is he gonna let him top him? He is, but it's gonna take a while. We then get the end of Act 1. These guys aren't yet in a relationship when this ends. They are kind of in an unacknowledged relationship. Gareth has a flashback to being a child, and we get some depth to why he masks his psychopathic and sociopathic tendencies. His brother Killian was into like killing animals and stuff, and is like a very disturbed and damaged young man, and that was very disappointing to Gareth's father and his family. So Gareth is like, oh, I have those feelings too, but I'm just going to hide them, and I'm so good at hiding them, they'll never know. I'm sure my parents never knew any of this stuff about me. Later, Gareth sees Caden with a very attractive lady at a coffee place, is furious, and demands that Caden leaves and meet with him at his apartment, and this is when Gareth says, he just spells out the consensual non-consent thing. He's like, I want to get rotated so hard. But he can't like want it. He can't willingly allow that to happen to him. And Caden is like, I am more than down to rotate my right up your butt. This is another one of those situations where Gareth literally gets rotated. Like Caden literally just flips him around. So after getting rotated, Gareth he gets tied down on a bed, with his arms out, and then implausible things that often happen in romance stories happen in this scene. All the characters have like owl necks where they can like rotate their heads around 180 degrees to see what's going on behind them. There's like an implication of extreme flexibility on both of their parts as Caden is topping Gareth, who is flat on the bed, and also like kissing him and doing stuff with his front. Caden also, after lubing up Gareth, says, my virgin is dripping wet. Ugh. And like, honestly, I didn't mind this scene for a first time. I think the intellectual thoughts that Gareth, and it is from his perspective, is having like bottoming for the first time, makes sense. It is sort of like some initial panic. There is like, oh gosh, this hurts a little, but now it's like I'm getting used to it. There is, for the length of the scene, it goes on for many pages, there's not enough description of like the physical sensations that he's having. But I don't hate this scene. And like, for example, Caden is described as being like very big, very long. He feels him very deep. He even has a thought like, I think I feel him in my stomach. Am I supposed to feel him in my stomach? I think that is like a funny thought. And that could be like going past your second hole. But that is certainly not what Kent was going for. I don't know that she knows about that, given like other things that happen in this book. I don't know that she knows anything about anal sex at all. But anyway, Gareth finishes hands free, of course. Caden makes a deposit inside, and this puts Gareth back into the White Room. Getting getting rotated this hard puts him into that subspace where, you know, whatever, the bats in his tummy are no longer slaughtering each other, and the void, which he mentioned in the very first chapter and is about to come up when we get closer to the halfway point, is no longer gnawing at him. He's in that White Room. But also, there's just like incredibly lazy writing at this moment, which is Gareth thinks, I can't even pretend I hated it, not even slightly. If anything, it feels like a pivotal moment in my life. Yes, definitely a thing that people think when pivotal moments happen in their life. This was a pivotal moment. But anyway, now they're in love. We'll wait a while for them to say this, but this concludes the first act. And now Gareth is having a sexuality crisis. He's lost his attraction to girls. Although the more he thinks about it, the more he thinks he wasn't actually attracted to anyone. He is later going to discover that he is some kind of asexual and demisexual, but he's not there yet. It's all a bit of a jumble in his head, and he he decides to do an experiment, which I think is actually a thing that someone might do in this situation. He looks at some gay porn, he looks at some straight porn, and he's like, I'm not really turned on by any of this. I'm only turned on by one thing, getting rotated. Anyway, he runs into this guy, Vaughn, who is one of the more important side characters. Vaughn is going to be in a relationship with that Julian guy in a later Rina Kent verse book. Vaughn is part of the Heathens clan, but he doesn't live on the island. He lives in the United States. Vaughn and Caden are going to have an interesting Reddit conversation, but we're not quite there yet. Anyway, this also becomes the like B-side of a scene from God of Fury where Nico was doing like this Goldilocks thing where he was asking people like, hey, are you into guys? And like one of them is like, no, I'm totally straight. And one of them is like, no, I'm totally gay. And one of them was like, well, there is this one guy. Well, that's this scene. That was in fact Gareth. I didn't know who Gareth was at that time, but now I know everything about him, and that, you know, his affinity for rotation. So we see the other side of that, and Nico diagnoses Gareth as a bottom because Gareth is lazy. Gareth then proceeds to deliver the opening statement in this mock trial situation against like a competitive student, this woman Zara. She doesn't come up very frequently. She's kind of like a fairly minor side character. And Caden heaps praise on Zara and is critical to Gareth, which makes Gareth lose his goddamn mind. Lose his goddamn mind so much so that he breaks into Caden's place again. Caden has not changed the code on the door, so you gotta think that like maybe he was fine with this happening in the future. Anyway, Caden is taking an ice bath, which perplexingly it is weirdly up because this is a punishment that his father inflicted on him from childhood and now is just like a thing that he does while smoking cigarettes. Gareth is there and Caden is just like, well, would you like to go to the kitchen? And they go to the kitchen, and Gareth starts eating some strawberries, and super genius Caden Lockwood knows that they must be important somehow because the strawberries were in the back of the refrigerator, and no one, only a maniac, would go to the back of the refrigerator to get a fruit unless that fruit was meaningful to him. So these are very important strawberries. Remember, these are both super geniuses who are attuned to every minor detail. And that's why Caden didn't notice that Gareth had a taser with him, and while they are fighting in the kitchen, Caden gets rotated. But it's not going to last very long. It's going to last for about 90 seconds because Gareth, this like push-pull thing it's actually not real. I think it doesn't really function very well as part of the storytelling generally. I just don't think it kind of executes it very well. But also, Gareth, he is going to come out very shortly and just say, I want you to fuck me, but I can't want that. I need it to be like you're making me do it. And that is like kind of an aspect of consensual non-consent. And it does get worked out and negotiated soon. But we're not there yet. Those butthole pleasures are going to have to wait for a few more chapters. Gareth had intended on torture capturing Caden with the taser and whatever else around there. And he brings Caden into Caden's bedroom where he has all kinds of like sex equipment. And he is about to tie Caden up, but get rotated, mother. Gareth is the one who gets tied up, and Caden again forces himself on this guy. Caden also says, and I think that there is some truth to this, but it's just like so reckless on Kent's part. Caden says like, you had the chance to me and you didn't because you like being dominated and you're lazy. So this is like the second character in a row who has diagnosed Gareth with being a bottom because he's lazy. But it turns out Nico and Caden are correct. The intensity of the domination, which includes like pain, slapping, getting tied up, pushes Gareth for the first time into a white room, which is like his version of subspace. And he has a usually busy brain. He has, just like both of these characters all of the characters in these books have busy brains and they're constantly ruminating about stuff because it's the only way that Kent knows how to communicate any information. But it's particularly bad for Gareth. And Gareth also, remember, is like constantly masking. He is a psychopath. We don't know all the details about it. There's lots of like little hints about it in Act 1, but we don't know all the details here. So him getting just like totally roughed up by Caden is turning him on sexually, but it also is like doing something else for him, which therapy probably could also help with, but that is not something we're not going to go there. Gareth thinks while all this is going on, he thinks that his stomach is full of rampant little bats that are slaughtering each other, which is very evocative but like weird. Why bats? Bats do not come back up. Anyway, after all of that, like roughing up, Caden decides to give Gareth a reward, which is rimming, which I agree is a reward. It is a nice little treat. And Gareth implausibly has a climax just from rimming, and Caden uses that as further evidence for him being just a big old bottom. Some time passes, and Gareth has now made a throwaway Reddit account to try to explore his sexual confusion. I think that this is the best thing that Rina Kent has ever done in trying to communicate some truth about like a queer male experience. It is not high praise, but this is extremely common. I think the execution of this is not so great. There's virtually no internal journey, despite the fact that we have full immediate access to all of both of these guys' internal thoughts and constant rumination. We don't really see much of an internal journey. He just throws this question out to Reddit like, I'm into this guy and I don't know what's going on. And he gets a bunch of comments back, and some of them explain like what demisexuality is, and some of them are just like, lol, you like getting rotated, get rotated, buddy. But one of the commenters ends up DMing him, and it is in fact Vaughn, who will have a relationship with Julian in a later book that is establishing him. And then they become kind of like anonymous buddies over Reddit DMs for a while. There also is a long runner through the book of text conversations, text threads between Caden and Gareth. I think like if you isolated all of those, you get a very different picture of their relationship than what happens in person. And it's going for like some kind of banter. And one of the problems is Kent just the book, lots of it feels like very isolated. It's just like a few like isolated incidents and sex scenes. There's not a lot that's like gluing it together. So a lot of the banter that you would see with them just being with each other happens over text, and I don't think it happens. I just don't think it works very well. Anyway, Caden reveals over these text conversations, where he often sends like long paragraphs of stuff, that he is turned on, Caden is turned on by the thought of forcing Gareth to do stuff, and he thinks that Gareth is reciprocally turned on by that. And he's right. Gareth likes getting rotated. Gareth decides to go to his apartment, and when he shows up, there's two older women there. What? But it turns out it's Caden's two moms. He has a bio mom, Rachel, and her partner, who he calls a Korean woman, who he calls Mom Gina. And I like these characters. Chapter 15, where we have kind of a dinner with these four characters, Caden and Gareth and Rachel and Gina, is like one of the best chapters in the book. It is used as a way to communicate some backstory information about Caden. So first of all, His moms are there because he's very sick, and we're not going to find out like what's going on with these mystery illnesses for a very long time, and it's actually not very thoroughly explained in the first place, like when we get there. But we know it has something to do with Julian. So there is a character in this book named Julian and a character in this book called Julian, because, you know, that makes sense. We get backstory about Caden's moms and that Rachel essentially had an arranged marriage somehow. There is a lot of stuff that goes on in this chapter that super genius Gareth Carson should probably follow up on, not even just through his private investigator Nadine, just like things are said and he comes to understand things and he does not follow up on them at all, despite the fact that apparently he's like so smart. So smart, in fact, that when the moms ask him, like, how are you doing in school? He says he has a 4.7 GPA in college in the UK. God. But this is actually one of the few times we see the real, like, golden boy charm that is constantly referred to. He plays, like, he puts up a mask. He plays a different kind of character to Rachel and Mom Gina. And I think it works pretty well here. But, like, while she's actually doing some good stuff here, Kent then decides to fast forward through parts of the dinner and skip over like the meat of this. So we see a little bit of it. And then again, because this is just like how Rina can tell stories, we're told that, you know, he continued to do this through the rest of dinner. Gareth playing the role of the golden boy and like subtly getting information out of Caden's two moms that he wouldn't otherwise like to be divulged. This is also, at this point, Mom Gina also speaks to Caden in Korean so they can speak privately while in front of Gareth. And she assumes that Gareth and Caden are together, and Caden is like, no, what are you talking about? He's like, I'm not gay, and he's like a baby. And Mom Gina says, feelings have no sexuality and feelings have no age limit, which, okay. So after dinner, another smart thing that Gareth does is he figures out when Rachel and Gina's flight are, and he goes to the airport to meet up with them, and he gets their phone numbers, and then he starts a group chat with them to get more information about Caden. I think that these are like rare examples. I'm like, oh yes, finally something that like shows this character for who he is. This is a rare example of something that Gareth does, which is smart and charming and creepy, and that is like the vibe that we are wanting with this character, but we very, very rarely see it. This is good. Most of it is not good, but this is good. Act 2 begins with another sex scene. It's the next day, and Gareth is taking a shower, and Caden him in the shower, and an amusing thing happens where there's lube in the shower, and Gareth says, why is there lube in here? And Caden tells him, I've put lube strategically in every part of my apartment so that if we're ever in a situation where we might want to have sex, it's there. I thought that was amusing. And their physical intimacy is starting to create some emotional intimacy. They are kissing each other in a non-aggressive, like bitey way, and after they finish this scene, Caden is thinking about kissing Gareth, and he thinks he likes kissing Gareth more than anyone, including his wife. Dun dun dun. Anyway, over breakfast, they have a conversation about their sexualities. They both don't really know what's going on. Caden says he's probably bisexual, and then he says he can't identify as gay for security reasons, and Gareth does not follow up on this at all. And it is not a throwaway, both because it is related to a thing about Caden's character, and then Caden, later in Act 3, when everything has gone down, he even brings this up again. He's like, remember when I said, like, I can't do this for security reasons? And Gareth is like, uh-huh. And Caden says, well, these are the security reasons. And Gareth, super genius Gareth Carson, like didn't occur to him to follow up on that. But remember, he has a 4.7 GPA, and he's a fixer and a golden boy, and he's so smart. He's so smart. Gareth also says gag when Caden starts reading the newspaper, which is the Financial Times, which, like, hey, smart, attractive people read the Financial Times. This is like a normal thing for people to do. Anyway, like over breakfast, they have an actual conversation. This is the beginning of the like relationship part of their relationship. I would have preferred if this started happening earlier, because Act 2 is beginning at 50% of the way through the book, but at least it's happening. I think it's a nice scene. 2 weeks then pass, and they have continued to like regularly hook up with each other. This is This is a relationship. These are the interactions of men who are in a relationship with each other. And like a very amusing thing happens is that every time Gareth comes over, he has tasers and knives, and Caden keeps confiscating them and like putting them into a safe. I think that's funny. Just to remind us like what the tropes are in the book, Gareth, while he's ruminating about all. No, we don't see this. This is all rumination on Gareth's part. He also thinks all of the tropes in one single paragraph. He's like, oh, neither of us are out. It's a secret. And he's a professor. And he's older. But I don't care if anyone finds out. And I'll kill anyone who gets close to him. Like literally every single trope about Gareth and their relationship happens in like one paragraph in Gareth's brain. Gareth is also feeling a bit emotionally vulnerable because I believe this is related to things that happen in God of Malice, but Killian, his brother, is repairing things with their father, and Gareth is feeling a little pushed to the background. Like, I'm supposed to be the golden boy, and I'm supposed to be the one who gets all the attention. He doesn't like that, so he's going to get, like, surrogate father attention, both from Caden and also from his grandfather, who starts becoming a more relevant character very shortly. Oh, I also failed to mention, like, when they were sleeping with each other, Caden had a thematically relevant traumatic dream about a woman who presumably is his wife. This is also where the only other like manipulation that I can think of in the entire book happens, and it's that Nico wants Vaughn to come to Brighton to screw with the serpents. And Gareth knows that Vaughn is into Julian, and he's got a photo of Julian with Caden, and they are like in a kind of suggestive pose. So he sends that to Vaughn, and he knows that that is going to trigger him a little, and that will help him like get him to Brighton. It's like that's the kind of like light manipulation between friends and family that I think a lot of people might do. Hope I'm not revealing something about myself right now. But anyway, that is like the 2 out of 2. Gareth being a master manipulator. We'll never see anything like that again for the rest of the story. While all this is going on, there are like light and goofy interactions. I think that this part of the book, it like slows down a lot and eventually gets really tedious as we're just basically waiting for the action of Act 3 to happen, but I kind of like it. This is the point where Caden and Gareth find a stray cat in the rain, and they adopt it basically, and they give it the name Mocha, Moka, which Gareth calls the European spelling. I'm not entirely sure what he meant by that, but it is cute. They are like becoming a little family. Although Caden, while this is happening, thinks the thought, this wasn't in the cards when I first got to know him, but now it's my mission. That is a more important line than it appears at first, because like, what is he talking about? This wasn't in the cards when I like randomly saved Julian. Like, you don't have all the information right now. You think that maybe Caden was protecting that guy Julian at the Serpent's party, but like it was more than that. A month passes, so we are like zooming ahead. A month has passed. Gareth has continued to DM with Vaughn over Reddit. He is firming up more about his sexuality, but we need to pull the characters apart again, and it feels very artificial. One day in class, Caden gives a long negative assessment, and Gareth is just like furious at him. So he ghosts Caden. Caden figures out, because Jethro has hacked his GPS on his phone, that he's like practicing archery. Caden goes there, and they have a conversation where Gareth says like, I don't like it when you do those things in public. Like, don't humiliate me like that. And don't hang out with Julian anymore, right? He's like probably stewing a little from what he did with Vaughn. It's like, I don't like it when you're physically intimate with people when we can't be physically intimate. And like Gareth has a surprising amount of emotional intelligence and like an ability to communicate his needs. Anyway, this is also as we are nearing the end of the second act, when we start hearing about the Void a lot. This is going to become like his thing from now until the end of the book. In the first 16 Gareth chapters, the Void is only mentioned 3 times, but in the remaining 10 Gareth chapters, it comes up in 8 of them. So this is now like a thing about him. They also watch hockey together. This makes absolutely no sense. It's just setting up a character in the next book, Kane, Caden's nephew. We then get an absolutely baffling chapter. So after that blow up from Gareth, we get a blow up from Caden, and it has to happen because it is the B-side, the alternate perspective of something that happened in God of Fury, and Kent just basically hasn't built to it. So Gareth texts Caden a bunch of times and Caden doesn't respond because he's teaching. And so Gareth is like, fine, I'm gonna hang out with a woman. And like I have no it just, it makes absolutely no sense that it happens. Caden is furious, understandably furious that this happened. And then we get like a scene that happens in God of Fury. It just doesn't make any more sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. It is here, close to the end of Act 2, that we also hear the name Harper for the first time. We will find out that Harper is a very important person to Gareth. But there has not been the breakup and the action that will occur in Act 3 yet, and Rina Kent seems to have forgotten to include any of the like luxury items that you would normally have in a book like this. The other Legacy of the Gods books, I'm pretty, at least the one that I read and bits that I've read from the others, like, you know, these are the sons and daughters of millionaires and billionaires. They have expensive cars and nice clothes and they do all kinds of fun stuff. None of that like happens in this book really, and Kent seems to have forgotten, so she shoves it all into like one paragraph where Gareth is like now buying tons of things for Caden, which is very funny once you find out like what Caden's deal is. But he gets him all kinds of stuff. One of the things that he gets him is an Aston Martin that Caden refuses, and this is another example of like, oh, super genius. Gareth Carson doesn't think that anyone would be suspicious of this college professor with no other known job having like a car that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. So anyway, he ends up getting him a Range Rover, which he thinks is boring. At one point toward the end of Act 2, Gareth shows up at Caden's place, and Caden is like on death's door. He's like gray and like looks bad, and he's ill and he can't move. And Caden is like, well, you know what we need to do now? Have sex. They do that, and this is another rotation. Gareth gets rotated by this ill man. Gareth is like on top riding Caden, and then Caden is like, whoop, like puts him like this, and then somehow keeps doing what he's doing and gets his mouth around Gareth. It is very impressive. We never learn about it, but he must have done like gymnastics or something when he was younger. Gareth is also like trying to figure out a way that this can be a relationship. He suggests like, well, what if we go to the United States and I go to one college and you teach at another, and that like part of the relationship, that we take that trope out. And Caden, this is when he brings up like, hey, remember when I said I can't come out for security reasons? Like, there are other reasons why I can't come out. And again, Gareth is like, oh, okay. Doesn't follow up on that at all. Like, it was like, no, we don't need that information until we get to Act 3, which is imminent. Anyway, they both verbally affirm that they're in a relationship right now, and everything seems golden until Gareth gets a text from an unknown number that includes a video from Caden's wedding. Dun, dun, dun. So we, the reader, already know that Caden has a wife, but now we have that, major revelation happening with Gareth. And then the reader gets our own revelation, which is Caden Lockwood isn't Caden Lockwood. It is very funny how it goes down. His mom calls him by his first name in that mom kind of way, but she doesn't use the name Lockwood. She says, Caden Lucas Davenport? What? Anyway, they have a lot of, as you know, Bob, conversations about like, oh, your wife who was murdered. And his mom Rachel is like, honey, I'm just very worried about you going on all these murder sprees. That's right. Caden Lockwood is actually Caden Davenport, the heir to Davenport Corp, which is the largest import-export corporation in the United States. This doesn't get explored whatsoever. And he also was married to a woman named Cassandra who was murdered. And he has a hit list of everyone who was involved in her sexual assault and murder, and he's taken them out one by one, and I'm sure this has nothing to do with Gareth. Gareth then confronts Caden about this and is very upset about it, and Caden thinks like, oh, this is just a Gareth thing. A normal person wouldn't be this upset about learning that someone has a dead wife. What the fuck is wrong with you, Caden? We also find out that Gareth's private investigator that he got on the dark web is actually Simone on Caden's team. He's been orchestrating this whole thing. We get a new character interaction, Declan, who is Caden's ex-brother-in-law. So this is Cassandra's brother. Declan spells out the relationship with Gareth. Declan does the bullet point list of all of this. It's like, Caden, you know that you're the heir of Davenport Corp. Cassandra, who goes by Sandra, helped the company by flirting with a senator, Senator Baltimore, to get a government contract, and then she ghosted him. Baltimore, a sitting U.S. senator, retaliated against the wife of this powerful man by inviting her to a secluded vacation house where she was gang raped to death. They then threw her body in a river, and it wasn't found until two weeks later when a maid confessed about this to Caden. And then Declan says, but there was no evidence, so the justice system was useless. And I have like, what do you mean there was no evidence? The maid! What do you mean? What do you mean, Declan? So Gareth meets with Declan, who spells all of this out. Caden's plan was to ruin Alexander Carson by killing off all of his family first, and you were like the first one on the list. So that is why Caden ran into him in the first place. And Gareth panics. He thinks like the White Room is now completely splashed with red. He has like given himself knife wounds. I forgot about this. Like when he learns that Caden had a wife, he started just like cutting up his arms, which is a thing that Bran does as well. This is another copy paste from God of Fury. Now he like is digging inside of his wounds, and Declan is like, ooh, this is weird. And then he just like, boop, syringes him, all of it, instead of just like a half like Gareth does. So Gareth is now kidnapped and is tortured. He's brought to the United States and is tortured by Declan and his cronies. And they find out that Gareth is basically like immune to pain. So instead of torturing him physically, they just play Caden's wedding tape on a loop for him, driving him mad. This is also where we get the reveal about Harper. This is wild. Harper was Gareth's teenage girlfriend, and he liked her a lot because she was a normal, good person. She did charitable work, and she stood up to bullies, but she had a dark secret, which is her father, a man named David, regularly sexually abused her as a child, and her mother died from cancer, and after dying from cancer, her father told her that it is her duty to fulfill him sexually, and then she killed herself. That's a lot. That's a lot. I don't like that. So what does Gareth, a young teenage man, to do about this? He goes over to their house after this has all gone down, finding David humping his dead daughter's bed, and he murders him. Gareth's grandfather, Alexander Carson, and his father cover all of this up using Baltimore, who was a police chief at the time. This was before Cassandra's death. They cover all of this up. And what food did Alexander Carson give to Gareth while all of this was going down? Very important, strawberries, because everything about characters must ultimately be related to some kind of childhood trauma. We then get a daring rescue attempt by Caden, Jethro, and Simone. They have a squad that's flown to Chicago. They bust Gareth out of the location that Declan was hiding him in. And this is where we learn that not only is Caden the heir to Davenport Corporation, a responsibility that he shares with his stepbrother Grant, but he is also a member of something called Vencor, a secret society of the wealthiest and most powerful families in the northeast of the United States. They are described as not just manipulating power, but redefining it, which sounds very ChatGPT. This secret society is the security reason why Caden can't come out, because they are like, on top of being essentially an evil cabal, they're also very homophobic. I don't know why they would give a about this. But we also find out that Caden's dad, Harold, was a maniac and put him through like military style training and non-military style training. One of the things he made Caden do as a 7-year-old was spend 3 days trapped at the bottom of a well full of snakes. He also murdered Caden's stepbrother Grant's girlfriend when they were planning to elope, and the murder was done in front of Caden, who was 7 at the time. Vencor, on top of being homophobic, also performs arranged marriages. So this is where we find out that Cassandra was not the love of Caden's life. That was an arranged marriage between like two of these families. They were a good partnership, but they never like loved each other because like he can only love Gareth. Caden reflects that he had in fact planned to kill Gareth, and that the events that went down at the beginning of the book where Gareth was using roofies on someone and was doing something sexual confirmed to him that Gareth has like a genetic predisposition like his grandfather before him to be, to perform, like to do sexual assault. And so Caden wanted to, he thinks the words, he wanted to reverse the positions, get rotated. But while that was going down, he simultaneously became fascinated with Gareth. And obviously now we know that they are in love. There's tons of info dumping in these last few chapters. Caden connects with Gareth's grandfather, and this is so confusing because Caden calls Alexander Carson, and he says, "I'm Caden Davenport," and Alexander is like, "Yeah, everyone on the world, everyone on the planet knows who you are." How is it possible that he could be just like a college professor and no one would be like, "Oh, hey, that's Caden Davenport"? Anyway, he reassures Alexander Carson, like, "Hey, I've got your grandson. It's okay." Gareth is recovering at a safe house. And when he gets better, he like, just like Bran, like gets a shard of glass or something and is starting to like cut himself up because he's like, "Oh no, I've got Caden inside of me, but you're in love with a woman," or whatever. He hasn't totally like learned that, he doesn't know all of this stuff about the secret society of homophobic elite families or whatever. So Caden says like, no, just like take it out on me. And it's like very, just like, it's very toxic. They also like communicate a lot of things back and forth that we already know, but they don't know. And I don't like, that seems like it could have been skipped. Gareth gets dropped off at his family home where he learns that his family knew he was a sociopath the whole time. He didn't need to do the masking thing at all. They already knew. And the reason why they knew, oh my God, because super genius Gareth Carson, when he was 11 or something, tried to drown a kid in their family pool for having pissed him off. And he remembers this event with vivid clarity. His dad describes it to him and he was like, "Oh yeah, I hated that kid." And it's like, you don't think that was maybe an early sign, buddy? Anyway, Alexander also like explains the Cassandra thing, which doesn't make a lot of sense. He explains like, "Oh yeah, we use Baltimore to help cover up your thing." And then in an unrelated turn of events, "I was at the beach house where this woman was killed, but I was just leaving and I saw her come in, and then I like put it all together." Gareth also comes out as maybe bi and with Caden, and everyone is like surprisingly okay with the bi thing. They are not so thrilled with the like Caden being 11 years older thing. But at the end of the book, Gareth's mom says basically the same thing that Mom Gina says, which is like, "Well, they love each other and love doesn't have an age.
Age is just a number that the government keeps track of."
Okay, so we're almost done. Caden tracks down Declan, and execution style takes care of him after some extensive torture, which happens off screen. While that's happening, Gareth is like continuing to explain things to his family. He talks to Kill about, their Kill is also like sexually fluid in some way, and they're both, psychopaths and sociopaths, which Gareth hilariously describes as neurodivergent. And then we get another copy paste from God of Fury that I didn't like in that book, and I didn't like it in this book either. Killian accepts Gareth as bi or whatever, but he he says like, "Yeah, I'm all about fluidity. But I'm a little bummed that you're a bottom." That sucks, and is exactly the same thing Landon said to Brandon in God of Fury in almost the same situation as well when Brandon was recovering. Anyway, after Caden takes care of Declan, he goes and has a think on a rocky outcropping, like overlooking the ocean, and he like. This is so dumb. He has like a conversation with Cassandra, which would land a lot harder if he cared about Cassandra, but it has now been established that they didn't like love each other. They were just kind of partners. But anyway, he says like, "Oh, maybe I like turned this whole justice quest into like a murder thing just for me. Yeah, you think?" And he has to like let Cassandra go so he can be with Gareth. Although what Caden is thinking is that he needs to protect Gareth. We're now like almost at the end of the book, so lots of things are getting cleaned up. Caden like tells Gareth straight up, like, I don't care about anything. I just want to be with you, which is then very awkward because Gareth is like, oh, but I have to clean up all of these misunderstandings from earlier. I wasn't going to rape Julian. I was just going to take a picture of him and ruin his life. And it was definitely sexual assault, but let's not think about that. And also, my grandfather wasn't involved in the rape of your ex-wife. So, like, these two trains arrive at the station at the same time. I don't care about anything, and it didn't matter. There is a funny smash cut where they have like now reconciled, and they're like, everything is all good, baby. And then it's like, bang, 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 something bad is happening outside. And Caden thinks, well, this is inconvenient. And there is a climactic showdown with Grant, who has showed up with a crew. Simone is described as fighting for her life, shonen anime style. Caden wants Jethro to get Gareth out of there, but obviously he doesn't. And Gareth shows up on the scene, and Caden takes a bullet for him, but Grant gets popped anyway. And then we get the end of the book with Caden recovering in an ICU. Caden has asked his aunt and Vaughn and other people to like assemble protection around the hospital to keep Caden safe from Venkor, because Declan, it turns out his last act was to leak dashcam footage that of Caden and Gareth hooking up in a car where Caden was somehow visible, but Gareth wasn't, and this has now ruined him with Venkor. So now he's like marked for life. When we catch up with Caden after he's recovered, they are again watching college hockey, which is silly. It comes up three times in the book in three isolated things, because we got to establish this new character for the Venom books. But they are now home and nesting with each other, and they are in love, and they have overcome everything. They have overcome secret cabals and their own sexual insecurities and their fears about bottoming and getting rotated. Gareth says, please don't leave me or I swear I'll kill you. That is the stable point of their relationship from his point of view. And the book ends with Gareth thinking, we're so toxic, it's unhealthy, but also right. There are then two epilogues. One is a family dinner that occurs 3 months later. It's a lot of characters that we're familiar with now, Nico and Bran, Killian and Glyndon. And it's just kind of like nice. There's lots of lovey-dovey stuff there. There is a perfunctory discussion between Bran and Gareth about coming out, which I thought was like totally lazy. It's like maybe 4 sentences. The second epilogue is 6 months later. I don't know if that's like 6 total months later or 3 months, 3 more months. Anyway, doesn't matter. So we're not done yet. They are now in New York. Because we got to get one more hockey reference into this. They went to a hockey game of Caden's nephew, who we find out is named Kane. They also go to this hockey game in Manhattan, which is confusing, right? Because like, how can they be in the United States? But we find out that all-powerful Venkor can't touch Caden and Gareth anywhere in New York City, because that is Russian mafia turf. After dinner, they walk past a mansion that Caden says he has bought for the two of them and their cat. Caden is somewhat upset because Gareth bought a Kane jersey. I don't know that colleges normally sell jerseys, but he bought a player jersey of Kane's, but it turns out that Gareth wanted it because it says Davenport on the back, and it is symbolic of his commitment. But Caden wants to do something even more symbolic, and he gets down on one knee. Gareth says yes, and Caden picks Gareth up and carries him across the threshold of the new house. And of course, Gareth will take Caden's last name because he is the bottom, which is code for girl. The end. All right, let's discuss this book. The things that I liked, the many more things that I didn't like, and everything else in between. I want to start with dark romance. I had intended to do a long section about dark romance in the middle of this video, but it has now grown and blossomed, and it is probably going to be its own video about dark romance. The point of this section, though, was for me to say that I don't hold it against this book that it's a dark romance, and in fact, I might like dark romance. I don't think I like this romance. I don't think I like this dark romance author, although there are things that I do like about this book. But I am not immediately put off by the idea that we have morally dark or morally gray main characters, that there are intense situations. And as I was reading this book and thinking about what the review was going to be, I was sitting out in my living room and I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. It was my in shrink wrap VHS copy of Terrifier 3. I also have Blu-rays like a normal person. This is neat to have, but I don't have a VHS player. I don't know. If someone has a VHS player and they want to like stop by my house and watch Terrifier 3 on VHS, don't do it. Don't stalk me, bro. But anyway, I am a fan of the Terrifier series. I am also a fan of the Saw series and Hellraiser. And also look at this. It has a very cool inside, but it is very anatomically correct. And I fear if I pull this out, I don't think it'll like it. I am also a fan of the Silent Hill video games and Resident Evil. And on top of all of that, I am very afraid of heights. I don't like being in high places. I don't like looking down from tall buildings. And yet, I very much enjoy roller coasters. That is all to say that I am a fan of extreme horror and thriller media, but that doesn't mean that I want it to happen to me or that I want it to happen to you or anyone else in the world. My engagement with dark and extreme media gives me a thrill, though. It is titillating. It's fun. The Terrifier movies, if they work for you, are fun. And yes, that means you are having fun while watching people being dismembered, while a chainsaw is like going, like bisecting a person, or while a zombie woman is using a shard of glass, on herself. These are extreme situations, and sometimes we like to put ourselves into extreme situations in fiction, in literature, in movies, from a position of literal physical and somewhat psychological safety, where we can consume that and deal with things. And yes, sometimes we have our own issues that we are working through. And in interviews that I did with authors and readers of dark romance, many of them brought up the idea of dealing with trauma or just like issues that they are themselves chewing on in fiction. But all of them also said that it's just fun. It's just fun sometimes to watch people do bad stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing right with that. It is not morally blameworthy, and neither is it morally praiseworthy. I think it is morally blameworthy to criticize fans of dark romance or dark literature as if they are somehow deviant. And I want to be very, very clear about this point as I go into numerous critiques of this particular book. My critiques are not coming from a position of critiquing dark romance generally. I actually think Rina Kent is not a particularly good author of dark romance because I think, and this is one of the main theses of this video, she is kind of lazy. And she frequently cops out, at least in the two books that I have read. She doesn't go nearly as far as she could. Now, that could be because many of her books are now being traditionally published. I know that the beginning of God of Malice, for example, was rewritten from her independently published version to what came out through Bloom. But regardless, I am not here to critique dark romance as a genre. And in fact, if you see more videos of me discussing dark romance and dark media, I don't think you will see it coming from a negative position, even if I do have critiques of it. All right, so let's get into some positive things that I liked. Mostly this is like funny stuff. I already mentioned two incidents in the book while I was doing the recap that I thought are particularly funny. I think it is very amusing that Gareth keeps showing up to Caden's place and that they play act this thing, that he doesn't change the code. Gareth breaks in and then he has a taser or a knife and then Caden keeps confiscating it. I think that is just literally objectively a funny thing to see. We don't see it happening over and over again, thank God. We just get the outcome of it, that now there are a dozen tasers and knives in a safe. I think that is amusing. I also think it is very funny that Caden, anticipating that Gareth was gonna keep coming over, has strategically put lube everywhere. I don't know, that might also be a bit of a preemptive thing on the part of the author like against, people like me possibly being like, oh, they're not using enough lube in all these scenes. She's like, oh yeah, not enough lube. I've got lube everywhere in the house. For whatever reason, all of the lube is everywhere in the house. I think that is particularly funny and smart. Kent has a facility with smash cuts from the end of one chapter to the beginning of the next. So, chapter 20 and 21, at the end of chapter 20, Gareth thinks to Caden, him. At the very beginning of chapter 21, he thinks, turns out he ended up being the one fucking me, which I think is funny. There's a few other comic smash cuts. There were a few of these in God of Fury as well. I think she is particularly good at that. Some lines that I thought are particularly funny. Early on, Gareth is looking forward to going to class so he can ignore Caden harder. I think that that's amusing. Gareth at one point thinks, I was on edge thinking they'd see me being fingered by an asshole. It was your asshole that was being though. Very funny. Demons is what he thinks of as, sometimes it's demons, sometimes it's bats, whatever the internal animals are that are driving him. Reading through a lot of the things that I highlighted, apparently a lot of them are Gareth lines. Maybe Gareth is funny. Something else Gareth says is, they still like my company though, which isn't a surprise. I'm the most interesting person I know. It's even, and that is even funnier to me because he's not. I don't think he is particularly interesting, but this is like, I should save this for the section about bad writing, but just like, I don't think that there was nearly enough establishing in this book. And as far as I can tell, like flipping through a lot of Gareth mentions in other books, it really isn't established in those other books as well, that he is an interesting and fun and charming person. He's mostly described as boring in the other books. And in this book, it's like kind of just that one scene with Rachel and Gina where he is like a charming guy. I wish there had been more of that. Gareth thinks, who would have thought I'd be so turned on by dominated, being so delirious due to ass penetration? Yeah, almost all of these are Gareth ones. This is another Gareth one. He really is treating me so gently for someone who has no qualms about hurting me. But I guess I hurt him too with the drugs and tasering and knifing. That's good. I like that. That's good. And then the one Caden line that I highlighted that I thought was pretty good is, but really, I love how he's holding onto my waist, even if it's to use me as a shield. He's touching me without trying to choke, knife, or tase me. Baby steps, right? That's like the reverse of the previous Gareth line that I said. Big picture things that I liked about the book, I think, especially compared to God of Fury, there's just a lot more going for this book. I certainly have many issues. There's a lot more video left of issues and problems that I had with it, but these characters are more interesting. I think when you look at Nico and Bran, Nico is like an interesting larger than life character, but I just didn't like him very much. Brandon is terrible. Miserable being in his chapters because he's just like, he is a miserable person. He is so sad and it's just like, I did not like reading his chapters. So ultimately, I thought their book was extremely tedious. And their book comes late in the Legacy of Gods books, and honestly, when I was thinking back about it, not a lot happens in that book. It's a lot of just the two of them having sex and being near each other and just like their push-pull dynamic. And then it feels like a lot of things happened in the other books and we're just seeing like different like sides of it. So it also makes it kind of confusing to read. Kiss the Villain, I think is way easier to read as a standalone book than God of Fury because it really just features some cameos and you've got like the B-sides of scenes from God of Fury. Possibly there are some from other books that I didn't know about. The focus is very much on Caden and Gareth. And I think that like they are fucked up characters. They're not good people. They're not meant to be good people. And sometimes it's fun to watch not good people do stuff and to see like a bracket get put in his place and, people getting off with each other in like crazy ways. Like that can be fun. That can be amusing. The way that Kent handles queerness and queer male characters, I think is not very good. I think there are like serious issues with how she handles, how she thinks she's handling dubious consent and non-consent. All that being said, I think that there's just like, way more going on for this book. And also there's just like, it's not zippy necessarily. I think it like really, really drags in Act Two, and it feels like it's just waiting to get to the wife stuff and Declan and the kidnapping plot and all the things that happen at the end. But when you do get to the end, in God of Fury, everything is crammed into the last like literally like 15 to 11% of the book. But we get a whole act of things, and it just feels a bit meatier. It's fun that there's like a rescue mission, and there's just like a bunch of more stuff going on. It's just like full of incident in a fun way. I don't really identify with or particularly like either of these guys, but I don't need to identify with or like a character to still enjoy watching things happen to them. That being said, I still am largely negative on this book. And I think my overall perspective is I just think it's kind of a position of disappointment. It's kind of like the thing that Gareth fears the most from Caden, like public disappointment. I don't know if this is something that Kent also fears and she's sublimating it into Gareth. So I hate to say it, but I just kind of feel like Kent was lazy in this. The writing feels lazy. It feels like not a lot more than a first draft, or maybe, she had like an outlining process and then did a first draft, light editing, and then shipped it. Because there's just like structural issues and all kinds of bad writing. My God, the like bad clunky writing section in this video is longer than it was in God of Fury, and I felt like that one went on forever. There's just so many issues, big and small. Let's start with the discussion of consent and dubious consent, non-consent, what's going on in this book, how she handled it. Did she handle it well? I don't think so. I think she might think she did. Let's get into it. So it's difficult to evaluate what was going on in those first few interactions before Gareth like lays it out for Caden that he wants it to feel like he's being forced. There are something like 3 or 4 sex scenes that happen before that moment. It's a little difficult. It's not a little difficult. It's impossible to evaluate those scenes without knowing everything that we know from Act 3. What that means is we have to start from the perspective of Caden went to this island. Like, this was a mission. This was an op. He like formed a new identity, which is really dumb that he thought that he could do this and that it worked, that no one knew that he was this famous corporate heir. And it was all to hunt down Gareth and presumably Killian, and then go back to the States probably or somehow, or maybe he would use like his network to ice Gareth's dad and maybe his mom, and then eventually Alexander Carson, right? Like, this is a revenge mission, and the first person he's going after is Gareth. Somehow he knew that Gareth was going to be, I don't, maybe we never find this out. He either somehow knew that Gareth was going to be at the Serpent's Mansion, or he just happened to be there and it worked out. But when he encounters Gareth, that was an opportunity when he could have knocked him off. What Declan says, and we don't know if he's freelancing on this or not, like if he knows exactly what the plan was, but like there's no way that Caden could have known that it's possible that he could seduce this guy, and he has no experience with men. There's really no reason to believe that that would have been on his mind in the first place. We know that he wanted to like kind of systematically destroy Alexander Carson, so maybe there would be like torture or something involved with this. But presumably in that moment at the Serpent's Mansion, that was meant to be like he was gonna torture this kid and then kill him and then move on to Killian. And that when he thought he was seeing a sexual assault, which he was, by the way, he then had the further thought of like, oh, get rotated, like I'm gonna do this to him, which also I feel like that doesn't make a lot of sense either. That for someone who is like the surviving partner of someone who had suffered a sexual assault, like why they would want to inflict that on someone else who has nothing to do with it, right? There's but like Kent always has like an explanation. She's like, oh, but he thought he was going to do it. So it's like, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? It's like that scene starts from like, I'm gonna like torture and kill this kid. Then it's like, no, I'm gonna assault this kid because that furthers my torture murder motive, and also I am like rotating him. And then in the middle of doing it, it seems like it was insta love, right? Like, and this is so like, it just doesn't make sense. It's like, this is what I'm saying. It's like lazy writing. It's like, I think Kent needed to like think about this harder, and like, this is like draft one, and I would really like to see like draft four, because Caden has BDSM equipment in his place. So it seems like he is familiar with this. So it's strange that, I guess it's just the fact that it's a guy. Like, he's never done this with a guy before, and it's just like that turned something on for him. We don't know if it was in the mansion when he was forcing Gareth, he was forcing himself on Gareth at gunpoint, if that's the moment when he was like, I'm fascinated, or if it was a little bit further down, like if it was the heathen's initiation and the, like, you know, the tree, when he had him up against the tree or what. But like somewhere around there, he decided like, I'm interested in this guy. And that started to like shift his mission. So that's one thing. Like, you have to understand that. And then you also have to understand that Gareth eventually is going to want this. So what I think of this is, I call it in my notes magic fairy dust. That Kent has this magic fairy dust of the motives and the thoughts of the characters from later in the book that gets sprinkled on these earlier interactions, and it makes them fine. They're not assault anymore because it's dubious now. It's, the consent is dubious. Even though Gareth isn't into guys, he never thought about it before. Like, because later he says specifically, like, Gareth has a line, let me find it. Gareth has this line, I don't believe I would have ever discovered that part of myself if it weren't for those encounters. So a part of me is grateful. The other part would still stab you, though. Ha 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 ha. So he's making light of this, but he is sprinkling the dust. That is the magic fairy dust he's sprinkling on this. Like, it was all fine because I liked it. It doesn't matter that I was being held at gunpoint. Even though when we're in the midst of those encounters, Gareth says things like, I enjoyed nothing of what happened last night. And Caden says, your hard-on testified otherwise. And Gareth says, that was a physical reaction, if you say so. So this is, again, the book has staked out this position that arousal equals consent. If you are aroused, you're asking for it. That is terrible. I think that is a terrible position to be in for this. This is another thing. It's just lazy. It's just lazy. It would be better if like this was an assault. Because like early on, Caden even says, if it allows you to enjoy this better, think of me as forcing you. He was forcing you. Certainly in the scene where he was being held at gunpoint, he was forcing Gareth. And I think like once we get past those early interactions, it is a lot better. Like Caden says, one of the many times that Gareth comes over with a taser or whatever, he says, you had the chance to fuck me and you still played with your knife like the little deranged psycho you are. You know why? Because you love being dominated and you sure as hell don't like putting in the work. Bet it bored you to death with the girls. So Caden is a super genius and he's able to diagnose all of these things in Gareth. And I think like that's kind of lazy, but he is picking up on things and he's right. I think that is actually not bad. I think Gareth feels the same way. And like, I think the thing that just bothers me the most about the like magic fairy dust is like, that was assault. That was sexual assault. That was rape that Caden did. And we never grapple with the reality of it. It's just a cop out. She could have done that. It could be, Gareth could be like, you did assault me. And, she comes up to it with that line where it's like, I wouldn't have discovered myself if it weren't for those encounters. So a part of me is grateful. The other part would stab you. Like, that's a haha, like release valve to let all of the pressure out of that dynamic. You could deal with that dynamic. Caden could say he's sorry. He could say like, and it would make it more interesting for him to say like, I'm sorry that I did that to you then, but it made me realize that I want to do it to you in a safer way. We never get that kind of a discussion with these characters. So I just think the depiction of dubious consent and non-consent, especially in those early scenes, is reckless and it's lazy. And I just feel like she could do better. Now I want to talk more specifically about bad characterization, Before I get into even more specifics about writing supposedly smart characters, here again, I think that there is just a lot of laziness with how these characters were constructed and how we actually see them interact with each other. A ton of Gareth's character is just communicated to us and we almost never see it. So, this golden boy, charming guy who is masking, that is something that, as I said, there might be two instances where we see that. One where he's charming and one where he is manipulative. Two moments in a 500-page book. And then all of the rest of the evidence is characters saying that he's like this, but we are seeing the evidence to the contrary. I'm currently watching the AMC show Halt and Catch Fire, which features Lee Pace as the character Joe McMillan. And I think that that is an example, a great example of a character who is constantly masking and presents as very charming, but is ultimately toxic and manipulative. And the reason why that works is you can see how he's compelling. In the early seasons, you can see how he can get people to believe in something and to be excited about something. But then in private, you can see the chaos. You can see when he takes his shirt off and he's covered in scars and how did he get that? You can see like when he's alone, how he is like breaking things and harming himself, how he is toxic and self-destructive around others, and you can draw a line between that behavior and the manipulation of his charming behavior. It makes him an interesting character. He's also very hard to root for, but by the end of the show, I'm getting close to the end of the last season, you want to see like some growth. He has grown as a character, and you don't know, because he's so good at masking, if it's real or not. That's interesting. That is the kind of character that you want to see. And that is the kind of character that Rina Kent thinks she made, but only through telling us and never through showing us. And that is a function of lazy writing. There are other issues with the characters. So almost everyone, although really we're just talking about these two main characters, it's kind of weird that it's so focused on two people. It makes it easier to understand the whole story, but for 500 pages, there really isn't a lot with other characters. But anyway, the two main characters both have like single point sources of personality. So like everything about them, there is something, right? Why does Gareth like strawberries? Because his grandfather gave him strawberries after I totally forgot to mention like one of his single point sources of personality. This is crazy. This is so crazy. So Gareth learned and Killian, I think, learned French from an in-home French teacher, a guy named Mr. Laurent, who would drop by their house and teach them French. But one day, Mr. Laurent kidnapped Gareth. What? Why? Well, you see, because Laurent had like got gambling debts or something and with the mafia, and they had kidnapped his wife, and he was paying off his debts through French lessons. That's ridiculous, but it's kind of ridiculous in a fun way. Like, it's campy in a fun way. But that was a secret trauma for Gareth because the family sent men to rescue him, and they killed Laurent, and he saw a dead body, and that was the first time he saw a dead body, and he was like interested in it in a bad way. And then while they were like cleaning up all this stuff, Alexander Carson gave him strawberries, so he likes strawberries, right? Lavender was Cassandra's scent, so of course, Caden likes lavender. There's lots of times, particularly Gareth will it's like Kent had cards, like character, description cards for aspects of their personality. And then instead of building that into the character, she just like copied and pasted the words from the card and put it into one of their thoughts. So Gareth at one point thinks, "I'm not a girl, and while I love the subtle variation of feminization kink," yup, Googled it, that's what it's called in DS circles, because him calling my ass or he turns me on, I sure as hell don't want him thinking I'm an actual girl. The way he talks about my ass is the only aspect of feminization I like, and I told him that. He also only uses the name calling in a power exchange way where he dominates me and I submit. That's all. That is a note card about Gareth liking one aspect of feminization and about their DS thing. And then it's like, instead of just like it happening, he just thinks the whole thing. It is terrible. It's just lazy. And sometimes I think that laziness comes out with like just jumping to whatever the point is and not having a logical progression. So there is another scene where Caden is talking to his mom on the phone, and he's just like, his mind is drifting and he's in his office and he thinks about like, sometimes Gareth is in my office. I like being with Gareth. I like to spank him sometimes, but I would never like anyone else to do that. I'm the only one who can do that. And then he thinks the thought of anyone else seeing him like that, hearing him like that, makes my vision haze red. That whole train of thought, like, he phone with mom, I am here. Sometimes Gareth is here. I like Gareth. But I'm the only one who can like him, and now I'm mad. That happens in 3 sentences in this. There's just no logical progression there. And it's like, Caden is being scolded by his mom. That's when she's like, Caden Lucas Davenport. It's that scene. His mind is just wandering, and then it makes him see red, and there isn't a progression between those thoughts. Like, why was he thinking a possessive thought 1 sentence after just like thinking about Gareth? Why would that occur to him? It's missing like connective tissue. It's missing things that can join those thoughts, and it like makes that things like that, like having like a note card description of their kinks, and having like, he's possessive, so I'm just gonna make him be possessive right now. It feels artificial, and it makes them feel like dolls who are being puppeted around through the story a lot of the time. This also happens to some of the side characters. So Simone is like Caden's main lieutenant and enforcer, and she is with Gareth toward the end of the story, and it's just important that Gareth knows Caden's backstory at that point. So she just tells him. She divulges all of Caden's history, including Vancor, a secret cabal that like runs the world except for New York City, without any kind of permission from Caden. She just like freelances that and decides like, yep, I'm gonna do that. And the only reason why it was necessary for the plot at the time. The character that had been established for Simone never would have done that, regardless of the situation. But it was like, well, she's got to do that now. Lazy. And then this might seem small, but I think it's a bigger thing about just like the failure of perspective writing, first person perspective writing. I think Caden and Gareth's perspectives are unique, but there is a lot of similar language in both of them, and occasionally I noted like, wow, this like, could either of them could have thought this. And I noted this with not an interior thought, but something that someone said. Gareth says, I listened to you too. No, Gareth, you didn't really listen, Caden says. You hid away from me to fit the image you thought I wanted of you. And it's that word image. Gareth is the one who thinks about his image, but Caden uses the same word. And I believe that his family also uses that word later in the book when they are talking about how he masks. Everyone uses the word image when referring to Gareth's masking. And so I think that that is a major issue with writing, that all the characters use the same language for everything. No one has a unique way of putting things. This gets into writing smart characters, which, boy, do I think Rina Kent is not equipped to write smart characters. I'm very sorry to say. Both Caden and Gareth are meant to be geniuses, super smart people, but their behavior constantly belies this. Yes, a lot of the time, particularly over their texts, they act kind of juvenile and immature. I think people act that way over text, though, so I don't really mind that, and that is not one of my complaints. I think that the characters that are communicating over text don't feel exactly the same as the characters when they're interacting in real life, in a way that I think could be tweaked. But I think that acting kind of immature and having like little running jokes and stuff, that's normal, and I think that that is fine. It's when we evaluate the actual thoughts and actions of these two characters, it becomes clear, particularly Gareth, is not very smart. So, for example, super genius Gareth Carson does not think that it might be unusual for a college professor to have an Aston Martin. Or even if there was some reason why Caden could have the money for that, he is also notably like stoic and austere and monk-like, and it just doesn't gel with his personality. So Gareth doesn't have very high emotional intelligence, and I think that that does kind of fit with his character. But if he is so smart, he should be able to figure something like that out. He should have known right from the get-go that it's probably probably not a good idea to get him this like extremely expensive car if all he wanted to do was get him a car. Super genius Gareth Carson also knows that Caden Lockwood had access to a high-end hacker who can penetrate the heathen's most protected systems, right? But he is working with a PI who is outside of their network, specifically because he didn't want to use his mafia connections. So he is now allowing someone from outside of the fold knowledge about this without having like thoroughly vetted them. And he tells Nadine, who turns out to be Simone, to email him the results of her investigation into this hacking. In fact, I don't think he once asks for an in-person meeting with Nadine at all. Now, if he was just using her for background information on Caden, that's probably fine. But once it like gets to the point where like Caden either has or is like a very sophisticated hacker to have gotten into the Heathen's initiation. Once that had happened, you have to escalate this a little bit, man. And he's supposed to be the fixer. Bro, you are gonna get the entire, like, all these mafia people are gonna get rotated because of you. I complained about this when I was doing the recap, but it is just ridiculous to have like a Sherlock thing of, you know, Gareth is eating strawberries and Caden is like, oh, strawberries, those were in the back of the refrigerator, so they must be meaningful to you. What the man, like you like, and also he said he was just rummaging around through the refrigerator, right? It's like, how big is the refrigerator? Is Narnia back there that you gotta go to like, is it a walk-in? Like how far back could they possibly be that he couldn't see them? And it's like, what if he just didn't like the fruit that you had, man, and so he was pawing around it? It's just like crazy. It is wild that he like basically makes this guess and it's right. Silly. Gareth also has this whole thing of, I don't understand this. This is like not even like a Gareth thing. I think this is a Kent thing. Gareth is like A plus student and all the professors love it. Well, one, I don't know that professors or anyone just loves show offs who are pretentious. And it's later, Gareth has the thought, people don't really like it when you hog the attention, especially if they're incompetent fools who could have never reached that height. So they wish for your downfall. They fantasize about it. He has this thought. But then, like, earlier in the book, he's that guy. So, like, is this meant? I'm not entirely sure. Like, are we meant? Is this supposed to be a journey that Gareth is going on where he thinks he's smart and he finds out he's not, where he thinks he's charming and good at manipulation and he's not? I don't think that that's what's going on. It's just like inconsistent. Like, despite being a super genius who is supposed to be the best at masking and figuring out how to fit into all these situations, he doesn't act that way, like hardly ever. Gareth in particular is a smart person who is written by someone who maybe doesn't know how to write a smart person. I am not saying that Kent is not a smart person herself, but it is not necessarily easy, regardless of how intelligent you are, to write a smart character. Gareth should just be way more adept at emotional manipulation. He should know how to like fit in, and he shouldn't come off as annoying and heavy-handed. And instead of dealing with that, we're just told he's smart and he's the best. So this is in some way a smaller component of just the overall bad characterization of Gareth and Caden, but it is acute because of how smart they are supposed to be. Now on to general writing and structural issues before we get into my litany of very specific paper cut complaints. I think taking the bad characterization and coupling it with a couple of my major points here, these are the fatal flaws of the book. And it is, for me, it is the late introduction of major things about Gareth and Caden, things that don't come up until the end of Act 2 or into Act 3 that maybe should have been brought up much earlier. I think that just kills the momentum of this book, and it removes a lot of the opportunity for having interesting things happen with these characters. So one of those things is the idea of the void. This comes up in chapters 1 and 2 and then doesn't come up again for more than 50% of the book. And it's not because Gareth is getting all of that stuff fulfilled at that point. He doesn't know about that yet exactly. It's just that we don't deal with it until later in the book. It doesn't come up again until like almost 60% of the way through, and is as the story starts to tread water. So it kind of feels like as Kent was writing, she realized like, oh, I need to start adding some things here to keep it going. And that's a function of like, I don't know if this is literally a first draft, but after taking a look at something like this, you should think like, hey, can I pull some of that stuff forward more than just a mention at the in the very first chapter? But the bigger like late introduction, it's the twist about Caden. I think that that was unnecessary, and we lost a lot of opportunities for much more interesting things by waiting to learn that this is a revenge mission and Caden is actually like wealthy and powerful and that he had been targeting Gareth. I think Kent just wanted to have big twists. I think her books tend to have big twists toward the end. And there are still twists, or there are still eventful things that happen, like learning about Harper and learning about exactly what happened with Alexander Carson. Those are twists. Those are eventful things that happen later in the book. I think she just like bit off too many of those things. So by delaying finding out everything about Caden, it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. We don't have a lot of foreshadowing of that necessarily. And there's also like there's so many chapters from Caden's perspective where he should be thinking about this, or it should be impacting him in some way, and it's not. So I think that like this is the like Alfred Hitchcock definition of suspense. Suspense is when you have a ticking bomb underneath a seat on the train, and the audience knows that it's there, but the characters don't. It would have been so suspenseful if early on, maybe we get like the first interactions with Caden and Gareth, and we don't know what's going on, and then we learned this is a revenge mission, and I'm trying to like off this kid, and here are all of my reasons for doing this. And yet, I am still compelled. And yet, I am getting closer to him. That's literally what was happening to him at the time. We just don't know it because we can't know about it as the audience. So those things were supposedly happening to Caden, but like Kent can't get into any level of specificity about it without ruining the surprise. And so we lose all of these opportunities for suspense and tension about like what is happening to me? I'm supposed to kill this kid, but am I falling in love with him? We find all of that happens in Act 3 once we are now able to know about those things. And then another major structural thing that I think it's because this is a romance book and Kent wants this to be, it's like this is like the one true pairing. This is like these are the true love. I think it was a huge mistake that Cassandra was an arranged marriage with Caden and that he didn't actually love her. It's not that like he hated her, it's just it wasn't true love, and we get that banged over our head. Like Caden says it, Simone says it, people think it that like, oh, Gareth, Caden never looked at Cassandra the way that he looks at you, right? Like this thing between the two of you, this is real love, right? And we want that. We want it to be real love. But why does it have to be the case that it wasn't real love with Cassandra? That's laziness, and it's not trusting your audience. I think it would have been so much more interesting. It would have been so much more revealing of what's going on with these characters, how powerful it is if Caden really did love Cassandra. If Cassandra had been the love of his life and she was ripped away from him and the only thing he has left is his revenge mission, and here is this kid who is part of that revenge mission, and then in the middle of it he falls in love with him. That is more powerful than I didn't really love her anyway. We were just like partners. And it's like it would make that weird scene where he's like having a conversation with Cassandra land so much harder, because like that scene he's saying like he basically has to admit like, I don't really know if I was doing this for you. I think I was maybe doing it more for me, but I still want your, and it's like, I know I can't ever get your permission because you're dead, but I need to move on because I'm in love with Gareth, right? Like that would land a lot harder if that was a conversation he was having with the memory of a woman that he was genuinely in love with and not someone that was just kind of important in his life. But no, we can't have that because that would be too interesting. I've already mentioned there's a lot of kind of falsity, especially in the push and pull dynamic. Sometimes it just feels like dolls that we're moving around the scene where it's like, oh, they're together now and now we got to pull them apart. A lot of that doesn't feel organic. And I also mentioned repeatedly how much stuff feels just copied and pasted from God of Fury. It is wild that Brandon and Gareth basically have exactly the same sexual arc. They're both male attracted, demisexual, asexual bottoms. Like what are the chances? And then getting into some of the sex stuff, This is not a Kent exclusive thing. This is like in a lot of romance, but every sex scene is more mind blowing than the last. So when we get to the actual butt stuff scene, which is meant to be very important because it also is that first like post consensual non consent conversation scene. And that is when that's when Gareth gets like pushed into the white room. Like that is important for him. It doesn't feel as important because all the previous scenes were also mind-blowing. Like they could just be good and interesting and like scratching an itch, but not like, oh my god, it was like the hardest I've ever come in my life. And then I came even harder, and then 3 times harder than that, and then up to 9,000. Just terrible. Just bad. So like those structural issues combined with the character issues it makes it very hard for me to say that this is a good book. But I do think that there is a camp sensibility that Kent has, and I do think that there is fun in this book, and more fun in this book than there was in God of Fury. And it sounds like I'm drifting into some final thoughts about this book, and we can't go there yet because I have to talk about all of the specific bad and clunky writing. Buckle up lest you get rotated. There's a lot. So on the first page, the first line, tonight I'm going to hurt someone. It can't just be anyone. The target of my night of mayhem needs to be a miscreant who's as bad as me, or worse. On paper, everyone is worse than me, though. So there's that, I guess. First of all, miscreant and mayhem and all this language is like, ugh, I don't like that. But it literally ends with, so there's that, I guess. Very millennial cringe. Caden at one point thinks, my physical form is only a weapon I wield to get where needed and another device of power. I guess I understand what he's saying there, but I think you need to, did the editor get rotated? My physical form is only a weapon I wield to get where needed and another device of power. All right, buddy. All right, this is a long one. And it's one sentence. I was pretty sure she was Yulian's girlfriend since she was always hanging onto his arm and deep-throating him with her tongue around campus. But she sure didn't look like it when she had her foot on my crotch under the table in the library. Disgusting, by the way. Don't ever put your dirty shoes anywhere near me. That's one sentence, somehow. And then what do you mean by deep-throating him with her tongue? I'm the best any girl can have, and I come with a 10 out of 10 recommendation rate. A 10 out of 10 recommendation rate. Gareth, is English not your first language? Yulian happens to be the fortunate scapegoat. This is Gareth thinking about how he is gonna be, doing his sexual assault semen like lube gambit with Yulian. Yulian happens to be the fortunate scapegoat. Rina, unfortunately, misuse of the word scapegoat here. Scapegoats are someone that you blame for something. Yulian is more like a sacrificial lamb. They are both barnyard animals, though. The reason I've kept my mask on for almost 22 years isn't due to a coincidence. Do you mean accidental? Do you mean it wasn't by accident? I don't think due to a coincidence is the phrase that you're looking for here. I don't possess the notion of fear. That switch just doesn't exist in my brain. Not even when being held at gunpoint. Anger, however, yeah, I have that one in spades, and it's mounting the more this motherfucker holds a gun to my face. So this paragraph starts with fear being a notion, a concept, something that can exist inside of your brain, okay? And then it turns into a switch, which is not the same metaphor, but all right. So now it's like you have this on-off. We've shifted, but still understandable. And then by the end of the paragraph, fear is now a thing that mounts, right? You don't get switches just piling up. Kent can't like hold. This happened in God of Fury several times too. She sometimes just like doesn't hold on to what a metaphor is or a simile through more than one sentence, and then it ends up not making a lot of sense. Gareth does say that he's often been called the personification of a Prince Charming, and I hate to say it, but you can't personify someone who is already a person. Personification applies to non-human objects, and she will get this wrong several more times, unfortunately. There's this terribly clunky interaction between Gareth and Caden right at the beginning of the book. Touch it again and I'll spill your brains on the floor. It's not a shotgun. No brains will be spilled. You believe yourself to be funny? No, I just dislike inaccurate information. You believe yourself to be funny? No, I just dislike inaccurate information. It's stuff like this that makes me wonder, like, is Kent not a native English speaker? And if she's not, I would understand this. I would understand this, but you know, she is writing native English speakers, is she not? This is not okay. So Gareth thinks the thing he has in his hand, which is his thing, the thing he has in his hand should be castrated eunuch style. Now, the thing he has in his hand is his. So Rina, you castrate people, not first of all. Secondly, you also typically castrate balls, not penises, but that maybe I'm getting a little like into the weeds there. And another issue with this castration thing is it happens 2 more times. She misuses it twice after this. Gareth thinks, at this time I'd usually be studying or putting on the show that I'm doing so, but now I need kill to leave so I can sleep. Just an awkward sentence. Putting on the show that I'm doing so. You could just say pretending to, right? I'd usually be studying or pretending to, but now I need kill to leave so I can sleep. Putting on the show that I'm doing so. He's so smart. Why does he talk so bad? I let them go to their respective classes and head to mine. Kill goes to the med school building, and Jeremy and Nikolai, who are in business school, go to that building. Just why is it so awkward? Why are these sentences so awkward? Why do we need to know what buildings they're going to? Like, this is kind of like Agatha Christie stuff. Like, oh, is the medical school building going to be important? Is the physical location? No, none of that's important. It's just extra words. And I hate to say it, but like these Kindle Unlimited books, you know, you basically are getting paid by the word. So I'm always like a little cynical about this. So it's like, are we like, is all the awkward phrasing in here just, you know, so you can make more money? After thinking about a girl who gave him a BJ, Gareth thinks she was so ready to ride my cock as well, but I happened to draw the line at sharing holes with my brother, and I had the same note in God of Fury. But Rina, are mouths not holes? Usually I like meeting societal expectations of me, being on my best behavior and charming those around me into believing I am my public image. God, like charming those people around me into believing I am my public image is just like if this is your internal monologue, Gareth, you deserve to get rotated. That's what I think. This is like some of these are kind of petty, I will admit, but like Rena does multiple times use the word disinterested instead of uninterested or not interested, and it's like I think we're losing the war on that, and you know I'll be sad that that has lost its unique meaning. These are again, especially Caden, and I think one of these comes in a Caden chapter. These are smart. Like Caden is 32 years old and he is very fussy in particular about language, and he should know better. Gareth at one point thinks this needs to be perfected to a fault. To a fault means excessive in a bad way, and that's not what he means here. But then, like, so I was like, that's weird. And then a few sentences later, he uses the phrase "to a T." So I'm guarantee that Rena just had "to a T" twice in like 2 sentences or 3 sentences, and then either she noticed or an editor noticed, like, oh, you know, you repeated yourself, and she changed it. But when she changed it, she changed it in a way that didn't actually make sense. Lazy, lazy. Another Gareth, like so many Gareth things too. A lot of the funny things are Gareth, and a lot of the bad things are Gareth. I don't know. Gareth thinks I'm de facto debasing myself to the subhuman hormonal fools I look down upon. Multiple problems here. So one, what do we mean by de facto here? Why are you saying de facto? And then more problematically, debasing myself to the subhuman fools is just like incorrect. You mean that you're like demoting yourself or you're finding yourself at the same level, but you're not debasing yourself to these subhuman hormonal fools. You might be debasing yourself in the same way as them, and it's just like wrong. It's just wrong. Someone needed to like highlight this and be like, hey, this doesn't mean what you think it means. Sure, I should probably feel some form of confusion that I want to fuck a man and him down to the mattress while he writhed in both pleasure and in pain. So one, awkward phrasing, but two, incorrect tenses. Sure, I should probably feel some form of confusion that I want to fuck a man and take him down to the mattress while he writhed in both pleasure and pain. So you either want to and they writhe, or you wanted to and they writhed. I have like 20 more. Oh God. Well, get rotated, folks. If he has the audacity to bring her, the hot lady from the coffee shop, he can't blame me for whatever my brain cooks up in retaliation. And I had the same thing I had when I think was used in God of Fury. Daddy, needy drinky. You know, I can tolerate your push-pull game for only so long before I snap. So clunky, awkward sentence, but this is one of the many times when one of the tropes of the book just gets said in the book. Suspecting or knowing I have feelings for my grouchy asshole professor that I met under the worst circumstances has been an experience. When Gareth is buying a lot of stuff for Caden rapidly over the course of one chapter, because Rina forgot to do that in the rest of the book, he says, I also bought a lot of decor items for the apartment and stuffed his wardrobe full of clothes. Decor items? She just like ran out of things or whatever. It just is like, you know, she didn't want to list out like, you know, Ming vases, Tiffany light fixtures. Oh, this one. So Gareth thinks, for as long as I can remember, there's been a void inside of me, an emptiness that can't be filled, sustained, or eliminated. All right, so like 2 out of those 3 words make sense for void. Filled, right? That makes sense. You can't fill a void. Eliminated, also true. You can't get rid of it. And those are actually good contrasting words too. You can't fill it up. You can't get rid of it. Sustained. Sustained. What does Gareth mean by that? Why and how would you want to sustain an emptiness? It's the lack of something. Like, or like, is he saying like he can't sustain it? But then that refers to Gareth and not the emptiness, and the sentence doesn't work. And it's like, again, I know I'm like very petty with these things, but this is like, one, these are supposed to be super smart guys, right? So like, where is their ability to like think intelligent thoughts? And 2, it's laziness. It's laziness, man. Like, it's language that's meant to sound beautiful and profound, but it is itself empty. Gareth at one point thinks I shouldn't be an ungrateful little cretin. He means monster there, and like 2 sentences later he says that, but cretin doesn't mean monster or bad person. It means stupid person. Which, now that I'm thinking about it, I do want Dad to like him, I really do. And perhaps that's an after effect of those times when I always craved his approval to the point that I invented a public personality so as not to disappoint him. I'm like, my head is spinning. Do you want me to say that again? I'll say this slower. Can you follow this? I do want Dad to like him, I really do. And perhaps that's an after effect of those times when I always craved his approval to the point that I invented a public personality so as not to disappoint him. It's just so clunky, man. Like you could I get the point of that sentence. I really do. You could go back and just one little light pass on it and it could be stronger, but no, we don't do that here. We don't do that. Being born as Grant's son isn't a tragedy I would wish on anyone, but he's passing it with flying colors. So you don't pass tragedies. And then I have like a bunch of highlights for just like goofy things that come up a lot. Every time Caden says he loves Gareth's hoarse voice, Gareth's voice gets like husky when he's lustful, but for whatever reason, Caden calls it hoarse. Oh, and then like every time Caden calls Gareth's butt my or my, particularly if it's wet.
Baby, that's shit.
All right, we are very nearly done with this. We can almost get to my fun slash fic theory at the end of this video. But before we do that, we need to talk a little bit about queer stuff and sex stuff. Before I get into this section, I do want to say that I don't have as big a problem with the queer male representation in this book as I did with God of Fury. And I think it's because like Brandon is just like such a sad, traumatized character, and his trauma is directly related to his sexuality. And it's a big deal in the book. It's a critical part of the book. And that's just like not really the case here. And these are not real characters, and you know, like these mafia, you know, prince and princess books, like, these are not real characters. They're not. I don't care if it's like good representation or not, right? No one is a character like this. You might have an aspect of your personality or your sexuality that is, you know, represented here. You might be demisexual or asexual. You might have struggled to come out for one reason or another, and then this might resonate for you. And it's like, in the fact that the rest of it doesn't really like all hang together, maybe that's not so important. And I just can like see that more clearly in a book like this, where like everything about these guys isn't tied up in their traumatic sexual history. Honestly, I think it's much more offensive that both of these guys, their personal motivations are driven by the sexual murder of women. I think the misogyny of these books is so present in this one. And like, I feel a lot worse about that than I do anything about the like queer representation. Nevertheless, I do have a lot of problems with it, and I'm going to go through a few of them right now. So, Caden thinks I'm into fucking mouths, that's for sure, but most women are delicate, and I've always been careful not to take it too far, so I've never really a throat that hard. That's, that's maybe a thought that a guy would have if he this is the first time that he was with a guy, but really it almost feels like you went to chat gpt and you're like, why might someone want to read an romance, and they're like, here is a reason, and then you're just like, I'm gonna give that to Caden. Straight men don't fantasize about other men's dicks or do they? Honestly, who gives I don't believe sexuality should be boxed in like some fools in my entourage. I still find women attractive and don't really care for other men except my little monster who left me hanging that night. This is not a thought that a real person would have. This is just gay for you. But it's like, I can recognize that. And I'm like, fine, whatever. It's gay for you. Oh, God. But like, this is much worse. So, that was Caden. Gareth thinks, I have no clue what to say to him, and I feel kind of awkward touching him of my own accord. If it's not sex, I don't know where I'm supposed to put my hands. And he's not a girl, so I'm not sure if I can wrap my arms around his waist all the time like I truly want. Ugh, I hate that. I hate that. Gareth also brings the same thing up in Reddit comments with Vaughn. I'm pretty sure it's with Vaughn and not in the like actual thread. He says, shut the fuck up. I'm not in love. Anyway, I kind of want to take care of him. Is that a thing in gay relationships? I'm like, do these guys not know any gay people? Have you not experienced a gay person in your life? Have you not seen a TV show that you're like, I don't know, I have no earthly idea what to do? So yeah, I'm like not a fan of the bi awakening of both of these characters because it is obviously just gay for you, but I can like mostly let it go because it is just like a total fantasy. There is no prep or protection discussions in this entire book, and honestly, especially with the first anal scene, I think that is a missed opportunity. That is a missed opportunity for a real kind of vulnerability, and submission, like real submission, not the like, oh, calling his butt a like this feminization and that aspect of submission, or like being tied up. Like having Caden have to explain bottoming to Gareth, that could have been interesting. It could have been humiliating for Gareth to talk about like how dirty he is. And that is there is something there, and we just didn't get that for whatever reason. We go so far in so many ways, but it's like, oh, we couldn't possibly talk about like, cleaning up your butthole. So there's an avoidance of like the actual reality of this kind of sex. First of all, it's very idealized and sanitized in a way that it's very discordant with the rest of the book, which is not idealized and not sanitized. So why is this one thing, right? That doesn't make sense. And then two, there is a desire for like danger, like these guys are like on the edge, something could go wrong, and it's always dialed up to 11 with the two of them, right? It's like they got tasers and knives and they're injecting each other with stuff, and it ends up making their actual intimate scenes like have like feel ridiculous and have like really weird blocking. The owl craning around, that kind of thing. Caden like constantly rotating Gareth, and the scenes feel less real because like Gareth has a knife in some of these scenes or a taser, and that should dictate the blocking of the scene. That should dictate the emotions of the scene, but it doesn't. It doesn't, because it's not actually important, because it's just like for just for show. And it's eventually Gareth says like it's for show, but like he didn't know that. We didn't know that. Caden didn't know that early on, but it's like the author knew it, and that's like more magic fairy dust. I will say it does feel very true to life that Gareth went to Reddit. The number of truly unhinged questions that 18, 19, 20-year-old guys ask on Ask Gay Bros on a daily basis is wild. Just like a lot of the laziness here, it really doesn't make sense to me that both of the characters start off as totally straight. I think that, again, this is just a missed opportunity. It doesn't make sense that this is both of their first times, and then Caden is also in this dominant and guiding position, because it's like, what does he know about this? He also says he's not an ass man. So, like, what does he know about this, like, even with women? How does he know what to do anally in the first place, right? And he could be very experienced with this with women, but no. Like, Rina also decided to close the door on that. So, like, it's perplexing. When they have their first scene, when Caden tops Gareth, Gareth says it hurts, and Caden says, I know. How? How do you know? What do you know? You don't know anything. Get rotated. Getting mad again toward the end. It's getting hot in this room. I need to finish this video up or I'm gonna get rotated. Speaking of just like not understanding the dynamics of this, Gareth's ass is called his back hole 11 times. His back hole, Rina. I had the misfortune of learning can I say this on YouTube? What a yowie hole is? Like, is that what like, how many holes do you think are down there, Rena? Back hole. Here's a line. I release a choked sound when he rims me with 2 lubed fingers and then thrust them inside me. You don't rim with fingers, Rena. Classically, it's with your mouth. So, I don't know, there's like some good things and bad things here, mostly bad things, some good things. The Reddit thing is a good thing. Another good thing I have is it is nice that they just accept each other, who they are, without a lot of turmoil. One of them says, life is too short. All I need to know is that we're sexually compatible and that I wanted you from the first time I saw you. I think Caden says that. I think that's good. I think it's good that like their immediate family and like hangers on are also immediately very accepting of their sexualities. It's the other things about them, because this story is just like loaded up with tropes and things where it's, you know, no one really seems to care at all that they're gay or bi or whatever their sexualities are. It's more like, oh no, Vencor. It's like there's a secret society of homophobes, or of like very powerful northeastern U.S. homophobes, or you know, it's like he's your teacher. Like those are the more relevant things. I think I like that. I think that's good. But I'll say right from the beginning, I didn't know who was going to be topping and bottoming right from the start of the book. But just based on Caden being taller and bigger, I did a note and I'm like, I bet I know, and I was right. And then by the end of the book, it's also it is Caden who tops all the time, and Gareth is the one who's feminized and is submissive, and he is the one who takes the last name in the marriage. And it's just like, I don't like that. I don't like that. Why does there have to be a name exchange in the first place? So, like, when it comes to sexuality, both characters' sexuality feels like a contrivance for the plot. And I guess that's why I don't really care as much about the representation, because it's like, well, these feel like dolls that are being, like, puppeted around through this plot. It's their sexualities, which are complicated and, like, multi-layered, are constructed for kinky scenes. And they're not really about any deeper truths about either of the characters. And I think that is a shame. That is a missed opportunity. And again, it just makes me feel disappointed. All right, now that we have gotten through all of those meat and potatoes, we can finally sup on the sweetest dessert. My theory that this is intentional or unintentional Obi-Wan Anakin Skywalker / fic. Allow me to present my evidence. Gareth Carson, 21 years old, blonde hair, eventually gets a scar on his forehead and gets serious damage done to one of his arms. He has a public perception of being a golden boy, but in actuality is secretly a monster. He committed a terrible crime of passion after learning about the assault of someone he loved, and he regularly says things like, I hate you, and liar. All right, Caden Lockwood, or Caden Davenport, 33 years old, about 10 years older than Gareth. Not like a daddy older, but older. He has a beard. Stoic, austere, lives a monk-like existence. He is Gareth's teacher. He is emotionally restrained and constantly insisting that Gareth needs to control his impulses. Several times, he says something to the effect of Gareth is going to be the death of him. He is a member of a secret order that prevents him from being in a loving relationship. And he had a relationship with a woman whose name started with S and is killed. And my final piece of evidence for this, in the climactic fight between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker, what is it that Anakin famously does in that fight? What does he do? He gets rotated. I rest my case. Well, team, we've been hanging out for a long time talking about this book, huh? I can't say that I liked it. I didn't like this book, but I didn't have the same viscerally negative reaction to it that I had to God of Fury. God of Fury, that still sticks in my craw that I read that whole book. It's so long and tedious and frustrating. This is also long and tedious and frustrating, but in different ways, and I feel like there is just a lot more going on in this book. Many people asked me to read Kiss the Villain because they liked what I had to say about God of Fury, and they said it's even worse. And I don't know. Is it even worse? I think it is bigger in many ways. Both of the characters are completely out of their minds. Both of the characters are in many ways irredeemable. And is that worse or better? Is it worse or is it more interesting? Is this good queer male representation? No, of course not. I'm not looking for good queer male representation in a book about like a mafia prince academy. Do I wish that it had been approached with a higher level of care? And do I think that it could have been? Yes, I do. But I think that there's way more things than the representation that could have been approached with more care. I think the line level writing should, like, where is the editor on this? Rina. I think that structurally there are like major flaws with the story that hold it back, that subsequent edits, more revisions, more developmental editing on this could have been such a stronger story, which would have made the camp over the top stuff sing more because you would have a solid foundation for it. I particularly don't like just the deeply misogynistic undertones here, but I also recognize that the world is deeply misogynistic. And yes, in some ways Rina is addressing that in this story because it feels like a contrivance so that these two guys can just have a lot of kinky sex with each other. I don't think it's very serious. And again, it is so like layered how bad the laziness is in this book. It is just stacked one thing on top of the other thing that turns it into this just like disappointing mess. But despite all of that, did I have a good time occasionally reading this book? Yeah, I did. Did I have more fun picking the Rihanna lyrics and titles for all of the sections of this video about the book? Oh, absolutely. That was the most fun part of this project. Because at the end of the day, I am frustrated and disappointed in the laziness on display by the author here. In The Dark Knight, the Joker, when he's about to set all the money on fire, tells one of his cronies that this city deserves a better class of criminal. And I think these books do too, because what Rina Kent has delivered is a worse class of criminal. So, Rina, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.